Our speaker today is Steve Nathanson, one of our members. After 40 years as an English teacher, published author, and college professor, Steve retired and began the Cambria life with his wife of 52 years, Marcia, in 2011. Living in Cambria has truly become the fulfillment of a lifetime dream. For Steve, being a part of this UU community has sparked joy and resulted in making lasting friendships, both personal and musical. After the COVID-driven 3-year hiatus virtually shut down the real estate market this fall, Steve and Marcia sold their New York home where they had lived and raised a family for 48 years. Leaving this home was a massive task, but the experience resulted in some powerful life lessons and insights. Selling this home has helped Steve and Marcia fulfill a new dream, spending a year living and traveling in different places and being free to experience a new and hopeful future. I give you Steve Nathanson, and his sermon is titled Urge to Purge.
Well, thank you one and all. So good to be here. It's an honor. And also thank you for the virtual audience out there in Zoom land. So preparing this talk, I had extreme writer's block. Where do I begin? And then when I started, what do I leave in? What do I take out? And then I realized starting a written piece is a lot like the subject of my talk today. What to take with me and share with my audience, you guys, what to completely discard, what to do with those precious ideas you'd like to carry around, but would be better off left unsaid in 20 or so minutes. Yes, I realize purging is a lot like battling writer's block. Where do I begin? What's important? Well, I finally decided to start with the person whose life lessons were heartfelt and heart-wrought, me. I stand before you this morning, a person whose life was literally defined by collections of stuff. Once I settled into my areas of interest, as long as I had the resources and the time to devote to acquiring more stuff, I was happy. My audio CD collection could have easily outfitted a radio station devoted to either rock, folk music, jazz, or classical. I had burned through about 10 high-tech stereo systems in my lifetime, but somehow I was always happily surrounded by music and more music. And plants. A house gift from some dinner guest turned into a lifetime fascination with plants. They took over every window, required installing special lighting and building an outdoor deck behind our modest New York split level to accommodate cacti over 5 feet tall. Yes, cacti can grow in New York. I collected books for my students and filled every available bookcase in both home and school offices. Oh, did I tell you about my guitars and my wine cellar? So I am the very epitome of a guy who loves his stuff. And then one day, reality slapped me in the face. But more about that later. The Oxford English Dictionary defines the word purge as 1, elimination of an unwanted quantity, condition, or feeling, and 2, removal of someone or something in an aggressive or abrupt way, such as defenestration. These definitions were certainly based on ancient medical beliefs. Indeed, purging was like the medical treatment begun about 3,000 years ago and continuing with the Greeks and the Romans down through the Middle Ages, reaching its peak, strangely enough, in the 19th century Europe. Hippocrates believed that good health was a matter of balance, just as existence was represented by the 4 elements of earth, fire, wind, and water. In humans, these elements were manifested in 4 basic humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. When these elements were out of balance, or when one of them was dominant, It led to a manifestation of 4 personality types: sanguine, phlegmatic, melancholic, and choleric. Or in other words, your optimists, your pessimists, your depressives, and your hotheads. I think we saw enough of that in Congress this week. Medical specialists believed in those days that ridding the body of excess humor could restore balance through bloodletting, the use of leeches to drain blood, as well as laxatives and diuretics. The early medical specialist seen here was called a phlebotomist, or one who specialized in ridding the body of an undesirable humor, mostly through blood. Our first president, George Washington, was given extensive bloodletting treatments after a surgical procedure. Unfortunately, he died soon after. Today, however, leeches are used to maintain blood flow and prevent undesirable blood clotting in certain medical applications because the saliva has antiplatelet properties and anticoagulant properties used in treating certain diseases and in helping in blood transfusions for the rare diseases such as excessive platelets. But there's others. Another successful purging enterprise was the laxative industry. Our bottle of Metamucil is still in the medicine cabinet. Jazzman extraordinaire, as I found out one day, Louis Armstrong, was a dedicated user of laxatives before every performance. You could imagine that Louis knew the importance of a vacated gastrointestinal tract would be useful before a trumpet recital. Although today bloodletting and purgatives are seen as quaint, somewhat dangerous interventions, the idea of maintaining balance and restoring mental and physical health by eliminating excess is still with us. Purging is seen to be a way to maintain focus and control, to detox, to rid the body of excess food and excess pounds. But by extension, purging our possessions should help us restore emotional balance in our own lives by creating a living or working space with minimalist simplicity, happiness, and efficiency. As I said earlier, I'm the collection guy, but I was not the only one in my household who collected stuff. After living in one modest 3-bedroom suburban home for 48 years, we found ourselves living in a jungle of collections. Our kids grew up and moved out, leaving their collections behind, their toys, their action figures, their Pokemon cards, their stuffed animals. They didn't or they couldn't take their childhood memories with them. A forgotten storage closet in the basement silently harbored sets of dishes, which we inherited from 2 sets of parents. The unfinished basement became a repository for every old bracket, bolt, or screw that I acquired over the years. So when we decided to sell our home, it became a 3-year process prolonged by COVID. The advice regarding disposition of stuff from professionals was, don't do anything until you have a definite closing date. Our lawyer and our real estate agent had plenty of horror stories of deals that went south at the last minute. So we sat on a mountain of stuff and avoided the drastic decluttering and purging that we sensed would be our inevitable fate. Then, in late September, on the 11th hour of the 11th day before the contract of sale of the house would either proceed or expire, we closed. Now we had 30 days to purge our worldly goods and move out. Sheer terror about this deadline inevitably kept me up at night. Our house in Cambria could not accommodate these accumulations, as empty space here was something we were short of. We weren't King Tut, so we couldn't build a big pyramid to take our stuff with us into the afterlife, but we could downsize and put our worldly goods into storage. Faced with this daunting and exhausting ordeal, and with time nipping at our heels, we located a reasonable 10 by 27-foot locker in a nearby storage facility. There it is. Let the purging begin. We made so many trips to a U-Haul store and the liquor stores to acquire dozens of boxes to fill our furniture and clothing. Now we had a daunting and soul-corroding task. What do we keep? What do we donate? What do we throw out? And what do we wrap in plastic cocoons to place in the storage facility? As I stare at a mountain of boxes and bags of trash in our driveway, I began to feel guilt and shame. What were our priorities? How did we allow ourselves to acquire so many things? I felt ashamed of my consumerism and my attachment to the material world. Sorry. Okay, that's enough, Madonna. All that fancy home entertainment equipment, dishes, newspaper archives, photographs, family videos, and musical instruments, including an unloved and unwanted piano that was forced upon us as an inheritance. It all had to go. Yet if we were going to succeed in making a clean move, I would have to break with so many relics, tools, serving pieces, and memorabilia. I thought of that insurance commercial. We can't prevent you from turning into your parents, but we can insure everything you've got. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, I had become my parents. I had amassed more stuff than we ever needed, even in case there actually was an afterlife or a sudden Costco closing. So our punishment, take everything we've got, wrap it, tape it, and stuff it into a box. Every day was a stressful decision about what to discard and what to keep. And that's much in our storage locker. If we were going to succeed in making a clean break, I would have to take away and eliminate all those items that had sentimental value, but served no actual purpose. So I began to ask myself, what is memorabilia? Is it a crutch to live in the past with? Is it a hedge against mental deflation? So after these initial shocks and feelings of anxiety began to wax and wane, surely moving and purging became a new form of self-discovery. Our spring garage sale early on before we closed had been a total disaster. It had been a soul-corroding experience to be told over and over again. This is not true in Cambria, incidentally, that, quote, everybody has junk in their homes and do not want to buy yours, end quote. If you think you're going to have an Antiques Roadshow moment, forget about it. Thanks to Marsha's infinite patience scouring the internet, we found strategies and organizations for eliminating what we couldn't take, such as our beautiful piano. It was a great morning when she discovered a new disease or a social problem that an organization was dedicated to combating. We had no idea what they would do with all the boxes they carted away from our front door day after day. But if it was to cure cancer or clothe homeless people, we were in for a penny and a pound. So eventually, the initial shock of purging began to enhance our feelings of competence and control. As the mess in my workshop began to dwindle, I became a rap artist. No fragile lamp or art tile was too difficult to cocoon and bubble wrap. No box of dishes would go unlabeled and then break in transit. Preserving treasures and protecting them was our way of recognizing how certain possessions were being honored and saved. For example, a favorite dance peppermill that we bought in New Jersey as an engagement gift was now a treasured spirit stick of our entire marriage, cradled in unbreakable bubble wrap and labeled "Save." Eventually, I began to love practicing the art of Zen mailing and packing essentials and mailers to be temporarily stored by Cambria neighbors. Thanks, Barbara. As for stuff we could not keep or donate, leaving furniture, tools, and electronics became a way to help our first-time new home buyer honor our home and save money by not having to buy all of this stuff from scratch. Giving away my prized succulent collection in New York to some happy gardeners was very sad, but it was about honoring the past and moving forward. Maybe by doing that, now we will finally honoring Joni Mitchell's idea when she sang in Woodstock, getting closer to the garden of simplicity and minimalism. The more I packed and donated, suddenly the freer and more liberated I became. Purging was slowly becoming less of a nightmare and more of positive self-validation. We can do this. We will endure. That sign, incidentally, was on our front door for 48 years. Now it's in the storage facility. Marcia discovered also that giving away prized serving dishes, furniture, and jewelry to friends was a way to find pleasure in watching the joy on other people's faces and giving them things they could use. I sold a prized guitar way under its value to the daughter of a friend who wanted to give it to her husband as a birthday present. Giving and sharing the joy of music helped me step away from myself. These were powerful moments of reflection and self-discovery. You know what? Maybe there's an upside to this purging. On our last 3 nights in the home, we lived in a throwback to the 1940s. We had no car, that was in storage, no TV, and no internet. Oh. The bare walls and empty spaces peering back at us echoed an Emmylou Harris song. 2 old hearts won't just love again. We don't need no memories hanging round. Our plants in the garden shared their last blooms. 1 30-year-old Hoya vine flowered a last farewell. At that final morning, we loaded our mattress onto the garage pickup, slammed the door, and said a quick goodbye to our house of 48 years. As we left, Marcia said she now realized a house and a home are different. How you choose to live is determined by what you have and need now and the future. So we began looking forward to the future and to taking this gap year for traveling and exploration, more ready and determined to navigate future uncertainties, and they will be there. It's important to note that we had no guidebook for doing all of this stuff, but as fate would have it, once we were safely back in Cambria and had a little time to decompress and reflect, as well as throw out clutter here, we discovered that there was a guidebook for decluttering and a master who explained these powerful emotions. In 2011, Marie Kondo published a smash bestseller, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. This was followed by live appearances on TV, and now it's a Netflix series, which is currently streaming. This was followed up by many different activities and articles of people, but her book was more than just a simple superficial manifesto about house cleaning tips or diatribe about lazy housekeepers. It was cleaning the soul. Kondo said that her method is partly inspired by the Shinto religion, which emphasized that things, whether living or non-living objects, are sources of power and inspiration. Cleaning and organizing things properly, according to Kondo, can be a spiritual practice, which is concerned with the energy and the divine spirit of things and the right way to live. Marie said, treasuring what you have and treating the objects you own as not disposables, but as valuables, and creating space so you can value each individual object are all essentially Shinto ways of living. Marie explained her KonMari method of organizing and rigorously gathering together one's belongings and eliminating non-essentials. You put everything together because only when you've seen how much stuff you've accumulated can you start to realize what you need to do. One scene in a Netflix series has a woman of the house expressing her total embarrassment and shame as she's crying about all the clothing she had emptied. It was tough to watch because it hit home. So regardless of whether you're moving or simply decluttering, Marie emphasizes we should decide what we want to keep. Focus on that, not what we're getting rid of. As she states in her book, all the things you own want to be useful to you. But in truth, I didn't have any use anymore for my collection of vintage power strips, screws, rotary phones, and exotic telephone cords. So I bid them goodbye. Purging the Marie Kondo way meant thoughtfully considering what you need and then making decisions about what to keep. As she stated, the place we live should be for the person we are now, not for the person we have been in the past. So tidying or decluttering is the art of restoring balance, just like the old bloodletting, but in a very different way. Because clutter saps energy, and you need liberating space, both physical and mental, to be efficient in this world. The lessons learned in the Kondo method have definitely influenced and changed our behavior, even here, after the house sale has been over for a few months and we've had time to settle in about it. Oh, but you say, what about those things that had sentimental value? The pictures, your son's report cards, the diplomas. The Marie Kondo method addresses these things. Again, your purging is based on a minimalist idea. She recommends that you only keep those items that spark joy in your life. Restoring balance means relentlessly editing life, just like a written piece. Choose those unnecessary possessions or outmoded ideas in your life, and then learn to thank them and release them. Think about what you see for your future and how some of the stuff you've acquired fits your life plan or doesn't. In his blog, which Judy read a section of, Becoming Minimalist, Josh Becker added another key question. What does the object I have help me? How does it help me to fulfill a greater purpose in life? Becker says we should be thinking not just about what we own, but why we want to own it. And looking back at our tumultuous summer, validated and clarified, while less is more in our daily life, and that's, while scary at first, can be empowering and exciting. For example, Marcia was so grateful that friends and friends' children could use a piece of jewelry collection or a set of dishes or a piece of furniture. And I was excited that my former next door neighbor, and I didn't know that until we moved out, that she was adopted my cacti and succulents, and she really could use my collection of music stands. So this past Christmas, along with a card, I got a photo of a thriving 40-year-old crown of thorns that was planted and in our grateful neighbor's home. And that's not crown of thorns, that's something, but if you could see it, this was a plant that I had for over 40 years. And the sense of accomplishment of these kind of things sort of helped us along the way. But as I continued to write my talk, and I realized that less is more is an approach that's not just a strike back against consumerism and materialism, but it has deeper implications. Just one couple with 48 years of stuff to get rid of is no big deal. But multiply that by infinity, everyone, and consider the big picture, as well as the interdependence of living things on our planet. In What Are the Challenges to Reducing Solid Waste, Jennifer Sellers writes, quote, solid waste in the United States is growing at a rapid rate. The EPA estimates that each American produces 4.6 pounds of garbage a day. In 1960, our daily rate of disposal was closer to 2.7 pounds of garbage per person a day. And the landfills where most of the trash ends up have been closing across the country. Sellers and other concerned scientists have pointed out that the usual remedies for excessive trash, such as composting and recycling, tend to not work. Composting is usually done on a small scale relative to the size of the trash problem, and it may release greenhouse gases that have harm for the environment. Recycling is expensive, and not all locally based recycling programs are effective. In the Columbia University School of Climate Studies, Renee Cho has written, quote, many recyclables become contaminated when items are placed in the wrong bin or when a dirty food container gets into the recycling bin. Contamination can prevent large batches of material from being successfully recycled. And some other materials cannot be processed in certain facilities. Many items that are collected, such as plastic straws and bags, eating utensils, you know this, yogurt containers and takeout containers, often cannot be recycled. They usually end up being incinerated, deposited in landfills, or washed into the ocean. And another serious problem with recycling is that, as in the past, much of first world trash ends up in the landfills of poor third world and developing countries. As Cho pointed out, quote, in 2018, China's national sword policy banned the import of most plastics and other materials that were not up to new, more stringent purity standards. The US then sent its plastic waste to other countries, shipping 68,000 containers to Vietnam, Malaysia, and Thailand in 2018 alone. When these countries later instituted bans on imported waste, U.S. diverted its waste to Cambodia, Bangladesh, Ghana, Laos, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Senegal, all third world countries with cheap labor, but most importantly, lax environmental protections. The U.S. still ships over 1 million metric tons a year of plastic waste abroad, often to countries already overwhelmed by it. Experts estimate that 20 to 70% of plastic is intended for recycling overseas, and it's unusable, and it's ultimately discarded in junk piles. And one study found that plastic waste that was exported to Southeast Asia resulted in contaminated water, crop death, heightened respiratory illnesses, and toxic fumes. And it also heightened organized crime strategies. So Henry David Thoreau once said, what is the use of a house if you haven't got a tolerable planet to put it on? Another area where less is more may have major implications far beyond just two people moving is coping with our planet's shaking environmental health. We cannot ignore the damage wrought by significant climate change-related weather events. Just this morning, as an aside, we left here discovering our garage is flooded. Other people have told me that, and town, you can see a lot of flooding. But our favorite little city in New York, Long Beach, was decimated by Superstorm Sandy. The damage to our home 14 miles away was minimal, but Long Beach, which is a barrier beach sandwiched between a marshland and saltwater channel and the Atlantic Ocean, suffered devastating flooding. The city rebuilt its boardwalk after several years, and the white sand beach, which is its most significant feature. But in front of the boardwalk, the Army Corps of Engineers built a 4-mile-long series of man-made sand dunes with beach-tolerant grasses and shrubs that had potential to absorb water from storm surges. Instead of rigid structures which could not withstand storm surges, like such as probably what was in Capitola this week, these dunes offer a soft water-catching and isle-appealing protection. That's a picture I took last summer from our beach. I understand that the city of Houston, which has had its own problems with climate change during Hurricane Harvey and other systems, has invested in creating marshlands and plantings for the same purpose. Of course, that means dismantling some of the man-made structures. But again, less is more. So this brings us around to consider purging in a global context. Decluttering is not just a first world malady and a second and third world problem. As the Chinese said, to be content with little is difficult. To be content with much, impossible. So minimalize and less is more are not just 21st century sound bites. As far as our planet is concerned, they are moral and existential imperatives. Letting go and minimalizing are really all that we have to hang on to. Thank you for listening.